Have you ever been judged unfairly the second you walked into a room? Judged on your appearance, your gender, your race? We've all felt a flicker of it. But what happens when that flicker becomes a wildfire of public humiliation fueled by arrogance and prejudice? This is the story of Dr. Serafina Drake, a brilliant woman standing in a crowded airport, holding a first-class ticket. To the couple in front of her, she was an impossibility, a fraud. They laughed, they accused, they tried to tear down her dignity in front of everyone. But they made one colossal mistake they never thought to check the name. London Heathrow's Terminal 5 was a symphony of controlled chaos. The vast, cathedral-like structure of glass and steel hummed with the energy of 1,000 intersecting journeys. Business travelers in crisp suits strode with purpose, families herded children laden with backpacks, and couples whispered last-minute sweet nothings. For Dr. Serafina Drake, it was simply a necessary gateway between two phases of her life: a week of grueling but successful propulsion system consultations in Toulouse, and the upcoming keynote address she was due to deliver at the American Institute of Aeronautics and Astronautics Conference in New York City. She stood patiently in the priority boarding line for Aerolux Flight 101 to JFK. The priority sign loomed above, but the queue itself was a sluggish, disorganized affair. Serafina clutched her passport and her first-class boarding pass, the crisp paper, a small, tangible anchor in the swirling sea of humanity. She was a woman accustomed to precision, to the elegant certainties of physics and orbital mechanics. The unpredictable nature of public spaces was a variable she tolerated, not enjoyed. Dressed in a tailored charcoal blazer, simple black trousers, and comfortable yet stylish leather flats, she exuded an aura of quiet competence. Her hair was styled in intricate micro-braids, pulled back into a sophisticated low bun. A pair of understated diamond studs were her only jewelry. She was reading a complex technical journal on her tablet, a habit that helped her create a bubble of focus amidst the noise. That bubble was abruptly popped by a voice, sharp and laced with an unmistakable note of privilege. "Richard, look at this." "It's simply unbelievable," the voice drawled. Serafina glanced up. Directly in front of her stood a couple who looked as though they'd stepped out of a high-end lifestyle magazine. The woman, probably in her late 50s, wore a cream-colored cashmere wrap over a silk blouse, her blonde hair perfectly coiffed. Her name, as Serafina would soon learn, was Carolyn Covington. Her husband Richard was tall and silver-haired, encased in a navy blue blazer that likely cost more than Serafina's entire travel budget for the Toulouse trip. Caroline wasn't looking at her husband. Her gaze was fixed pointedly on the boarding pass in Serafina's hand, her lips curled into a faint, disdainful sneer. They let just anyone into the priority line these days. She continued, her voice just loud enough for Serafina and those nearby to hear clearly. "The standards have fallen through the floor." Richard grunted in agreement, adjusting his gold watch. "It's a marketing gimmick, darling. They call it priority, to make everyone feel special. Then they herd us all in like cattle anyway." Serafina chose to ignore them. She had faced microaggressions like this her entire life. They were like background radiation, a low-level persistent hum of prejudice that she had learned to shield herself from. Engaging was a waste of energy she needed for calculations that could determine the fate of $1 billion satellite. She lowered her eyes back to her tablet, focusing on a particularly dense equation describing fuel-to-thrust ratios in ion engines. But Caroline Covington was not one to be ignored. "I mean, look," she persisted, nudging her husband not so subtly. "First class, really, it's probably a fake. I've read about these things. People print them out online to try and get on early. It's a disgrace." This time the comment was a direct hit. It was no longer background radiation. It was a targeted pulse. Serafina's focus shattered. The equations on her screen blurred. A slow, hot anger began to build in her chest, a feeling she had learned to control with immense discipline. She took a slow, deliberate breath, calming the storm within. She would not give this woman the satisfaction of a reaction. The line shuffled forward. As they neared the podium, Caroline turned slightly, her piercing blue eyes locking onto Serafina. You should know, she said, her voice dripping with condescension, that they have machines that can spot a counterfeit boarding pass from a mile away. They'll make you pay a hefty fine. And the embarrassment, well, I can only imagine. Serafina finally met her gaze. Her own eyes, a warm, intelligent brown, were steady and unblinking. She offered no retort, no defense. Her silence seemed to infuriate Caroline more than any argument could. It was a denial of her power, a refusal to participate in the drama she was so desperately trying to create. Unbelievable, Caroline muttered to Richard, turning back toward the gate agent. The audacity. At the front of the line, a harried-looking gate agent named Kevin Finch was scanning passports and tickets with a weary, practiced motion. He looked exhausted. His tie loosened a sheen of sweat on his brow. He was the picture of someone just trying to get through their shift. The Covingtons stepped up to the podium. Richard handed over their passports with a flourish. Kevin scanned them. "Welcome aboard, Mr. and Mrs. Covington. Enjoy your flight." They stepped aside, but they didn't move toward the jet bridge. Instead, Caroline stood with her arms crossed, watching, waiting. She had lit a fuse and was determined to see the explosion. It was Serafina's turn. She stepped forward and placed her passport and boarding pass on the scanner. She offered Kevin a polite, professional smile. "Good afternoon." Kevin grunted, his eyes flicking from his screen to her face, then back again. He scanned the passport, then the boarding pass. The machine beeped affirmatively. Green light. Standard procedure. He was about to wave her through when Caroline's voice cut through the air again, sharp and loud. "Excuse me, Agent, you need to check that again." Kevin looked up, annoyed. "Ma'am, that boarding pass," Caroline said, pointing a manicured finger at Serafina's ticket. "It's fake, I'm certain of it." The small bubble of activity around Gate A17 seemed to pause. A few people in the line behind Serafina craned their necks, their curiosity piqued. Serafina felt a flush of heat rise to her cheeks. The public nature of the accusation was a deliberate cruelty. Kevin Finch sighed a long, suffering sound. He clearly didn't want to deal with this, but Caroline Covington had the unmistakable look of a woman who was used to getting her way, a woman who knew how to file a complaint that would create a mountain of paperwork for him. "Ma'am, the scanner approved it," he said, his voice flat. "The scanners can be fooled," Caroline insisted. "Look at her. Does she look like she belongs in first class? Be honest." The question hung in the air, ugly and venomous. It wasn't about the paper in her hand anymore. It was about her skin, her braids, her very presence in a space this woman believed she owned. Serafina stood her ground, her back straight as a rod. She looked directly at Kevin, her expression calm, but her eyes conveying a clear message. Do your job. Properly. But Kevin was weak. He saw a wealthy, complaining white woman on one side and a silent, professional black woman on the other. He made the calculation of a man taking the path of least resistance. He chose to appease the louder voice. He picked up Serafina's boarding pass and examined it with theatrical suspicion, holding it up to the light as if he were an expert in counterfeit detection. "What's your name, ma'am?" he asked Serafina, his tone shifting from weary to accusatory. "It's on the passport and the boarding pass," Serafina replied, her voice dangerously quiet. Dr. Serafina Drake. Doctor, is it? Caroline snorted softly. Richard smirked beside her. Kevin ignored Serafina's title. I'm just going to have to run a few checks, Ma'am. There's been a security alert. Please step to the side. It was a lie, and they all knew it. There was no security alert. The only alert was Caroline Covington's bigotry. By asking her to step aside, Kevin was validating the accusation, making Serafina a public spectacle. The humiliation was complete. People were openly staring now, whispering. Serafina felt a tremor of rage, but she locked it down. A public outburst was exactly what they wanted. It would confirm all their ugly stereotypes. Instead, she gave a single sharp nod and moved to the designated area beside the podium, a small invisible cage of shame. Caroline Covington smiled a tight, triumphant little smile. She had won. She turned to her husband. See, Richard, all it takes is a little vigilance. As they finally began to walk toward the jet bridge, believing the matter settled, a new voice, calm and authoritative, echoed from the cockpit access door. Kevin, what's the hold-up on final boarding? The voice belonged to the pilot, Captain David Sterling, a man whose presence commanded immediate respect. And he had just seen everything. Captain David Sterling was a man forged from 2 decades of discipline and responsibility. He had the calm demeanor of someone who had safely navigated 400-ton machines through treacherous thunderstorms and volcanic ash clouds. His uniform was immaculate, his silver-flecked hair was neatly trimmed, and his eyes, a clear, sharp blue, missed nothing. He had stepped out from the cockpit to query the delay, and had walked directly into the tail end of the ugly scene at his gate. He had seen the gate agent Kevin Finch dismiss a passenger to the side. He had seen the smug, satisfied look on Caroline Covington's face, and he had seen the quiet, unshakable dignity of the black woman who was now the subject of a dozen whispering conversations. What's the problem here? Captain Sterling repeated his voice, cutting through the low murmur of the crowd. Kevin Finch visibly flinched. The pilot's intervention was the last thing he wanted. No problem, Captain. Just a small security verification. We'll be wrapped up in a moment. He fumbled with Serafina's boarding pass, tapping nervously on his keyboard, pretending to be engrossed in a complex procedure. But the captain's gaze had already moved past him. It settled on Serafina, who stood motionless, her expression unreadable. Then it shifted to the Covingtons, who had paused at the entrance to the jet bridge, their curiosity piqued by the pilot's presence. Security verification, Captain Sterling asked, walking closer to the podium. He glanced at the boarding pass in Kevin's hand. For a first-class passenger, was there an alert from security services? No, Captain. Kevin stammered, avoiding eye contact. It was a passenger concern, a potential counterfeit. Captain Sterling raised an eyebrow. He looked at Caroline, whose triumphant expression was beginning to curdle into one of nervous apprehension. A passenger concern, he repeated, the skepticism in his voice as thick as fog. He turned back to Kevin. And on what basis did you escalate this concern to a public detention of another passenger? Kevin's face was turning a blotchy red. He was cornered, and he knew it. Well, the passenger was very insistent, Captain. I thought it was better to be safe than sorry. Better to be safe. Captain Sterling said, his voice, dropping to a dangerously low level, is to follow procedure. Procedure dictates that if the pass scans green and the passport matches the passenger boards, if you have a legitimate evidence-based suspicion, you call a supervisor and airport security, and you do it discreetly. You do not create a spectacle at my gate based on the prejudiced whim of another traveler. Am I making myself clear? Mr. Finch, yes, Captain. Crystal clear. Kevin mumbled, his eyes fixed on his shoes. The veneer of his authority had been stripped away, revealing the weakness beneath. Serafina watched the exchange, a flicker of something not quite hope, but a grim sense of validation stirring within her. For the first time since the ordeal began, someone in a position of power was seeing the situation for what it was. The captain then turned his full attention to Serafina. His entire demeanor softened. The stern commander was replaced by a consummate professional addressing a valued customer. "Ma'am, I am Captain David Sterling. On behalf of Aerolux, I want to offer my sincerest apologies for this unacceptable treatment. This is not how we operate." He held out his hand. "May I see your boarding pass?" Kevin Finch, humbled and trembling, slightly handed the pass to the captain. Serafina simply nodded, her composure still intact. Captain Sterling looked at the pass. His eyes scanned the details. Seat 1A. First class. Then his eyes stopped on the name. "Drake," he murmured to himself, a flicker of recognition in his eyes. He looked from the pass to Serafina's face, and then something clicked. A subtle shift in his expression, a dawning realization that this was not just any passenger. He looked back at the Covingtons, who were now shifting uncomfortably under the weight of the crowd's renewed attention. The narrative had flipped. They were no longer the heroes of the story, the vigilant protectors of airline security. They were starting to look like bullies. "You, Captain Sterling," said his voice, cold and hard as steel, pointing at Caroline. "You raised this concern." Caroline flustered, tried to regain her footing. I was only trying to help. The airline can't be too careful these days. I saw something that looked suspicious, and I said something. It's my civic duty." "Your civic duty?" the captain countered, taking a step towards her. "Ma'am, what you call your civic duty, I call harassment. You publicly accused a fellow passenger of fraud without a shred of evidence, causing a delay to my flight and creating a deeply hostile environment. What precisely did you find so suspicious about this passenger?" Caroline stammered, her face flushed with anger and embarrassment. "Well, the whole situation just seemed unlikely. Unlikely." The word hung in the air, charged with all its unspoken meaning. Unlikely that a black woman would be in first class. Unlikely that she could afford it. Unlikely that she belonged. Captain Sterling didn't need her to elaborate. He had heard it all before, in 1,000 different forms. He turned back to the gate podium. "Kevin," he commanded, "pull up the flight manifest. The full executive brief." Kevin, eager to redeem himself, typed frantically. A moment later, the manifest appeared on his screen. The captain leaned over his eyes, scanning the list of names. He found the Covingtons. He found his first officers, and then he scrolled down to the special notations section, the part of the manifest that gate agents rarely bothered to read. His eyes found the name again, and this time he saw the full entry beside it. A slow, grim smile spread across Captain Sterling's face. It was not a smile of amusement. It was the smile of a man holding all the cards about to lay down a royal flush on a table of jokers. He straightened up, holding Serafina's boarding pass. He looked at the Covingtons, at Kevin Finch, and then at the silent, watching crowd. "You all seem to be under a grave misapprehension," he announced, his voice ringing with authority. He then turned to a large digital screen on the wall behind the podium, which displayed the flight number, destination, and on-time status. Kevin Patch, the executive welcome note to the main gate display. Authorization, Sterling Alpha 75. Kevin's eyes widened. That was a high-level command code, one reserved for significant flight operations. He fumbled with the keyboard, entered the code, and hit enter. Across the large screen, The generic Aerolux welcomes you to Flight 101 message vanished. In its place, in large, crisp white letters against the airline's signature blue background, a new message appeared for everyone in Gate A17 to see. It read, "Aerolux is honored to welcome aboard Dr. Serafina Drake, Lead Aeronautical Engineer, GE9X Engine Program. Your groundbreaking work keeps our fleet flying safely. We are privileged to have you with us." A collective gasp rippled through the onlookers. The whispers stopped, replaced by a stunned, absolute silence. Caroline Covington's face went completely white, as if all the blood had drained from it. Richard looked like he had been punched in the stomach. They stared at the screen, then at the calm, dignified black woman they had just publicly humiliated, and the pieces fell into place with catastrophic force. They hadn't just insulted a passenger. They had insulted the very person whose genius was responsible for the engines of the Airbus A350 they were about to board. The woman they accused of holding a fake ticket was in a very real sense the reason their flight was possible. Serafina looked at the screen, then at the captain. A single slow tear born not of sadness, but of a profound and complex emotional release traced a path down her cheek. She wiped it away with a steady hand. The karma had arrived, and its landing was anything but gentle. The silence in Gate A17 was so profound it felt like a physical presence. Every eye was locked on the digital display, the words glowing like a divine judgment. Lead Aeronautical Engineer, groundbreaking work, privileged to have you with us. The disconnect between this public honor and the scene that had just transpired was staggering. Caroline Covington's perfectly constructed world of privilege and prejudice shattered in that instant. Her mouth opened and closed silently, like a fish gasping for air. The sneer, the confidence, the entitlement, it all evaporated, replaced by a raw, naked panic. She looked at Serafina not with disdain, but with a dawning horror. Richard Covington, who had been a silent accomplice, now looked utterly mortified. He was a man who understood hierarchies, and he had just placed himself and his wife on the wrong side of a very important one. He reached for his wife's arm, as if to physically restrain her from saying another word, from digging their grave any deeper. Kevin Finch looked like he wanted the floor to swallow him whole. His career was flashing before his eyes. He had failed on every conceivable level. He had violated protocol. He had trusted the wrong people, and he had publicly humiliated a VIP so integral to the airline's operations that they put her name up in lights. He was no longer just a harried employee. He was a liability. It was Captain Sterling who finally broke the spell. He turned to Serafina, his expression one of profound respect. He handed her back the boarding pass, not as a gate agent to a passenger, but as one professional to another. "Dr. Drake," he said, his voice imbued with a sincerity that was unmistakable. "I cannot apologize enough for what you just endured. Please allow me to personally escort you to your seat." Serafina gave a small, dignified nod. The storm inside her had passed, leaving a quiet, steely calm. She had not sought this confrontation, but now that it had happened, she would see it through. "Thank you, Captain. I appreciate that." As Captain Sterling gestured for her to proceed, the crowd in the priority line instinctively parted, creating a wide aisle for her. It was like the parting of the Red Sea. The people who had been whispering and staring just moments before now looked down at their feet, their faces a mixture of shame and awe. They were not just making way for a first-class passenger. They were making way for a titan of her industry who they had just seen treated like a criminal. Serafina walked forward, her head held high. Her steps were measured and confident. She didn't look at the Covingtons as she passed, but she could feel the heat of their panicked stares. As she reached the jet bridge entrance, Captain Sterling stopped and turned to face the gate. His eyes, cold as ice, found Kevin Finch. "Mr. Finch," he said, his voice leaving no room for argument. "You are to report to the station manager's office immediately. Inform him that I have relieved you of your duties for the remainder of the day, pending a full and formal investigation, which I will be initiating the moment we are airborne. Do not process another passenger." Kevin nodded meekly, his face ashen. "Yes, Captain." Then the captain's gaze shifted to the Covingtons. They stood frozen, trapped between the scene of their social crime and the flight they were desperate to board. "As for you two," Captain Sterling began, his voice laced with contempt. He looked at their boarding passes, which Richard was clutching in a white-knuckled grip. "Seats 1C and 1D. You were scheduled to be Dr. Drake's neighbors for the next 7 hours." He paused, letting the implication sink in. The Covingtons would have had to sit directly across from the woman they had just publicly maligned. The thought was excruciating. However, the captain continued, "You have demonstrated behavior that is fundamentally incompatible with the safety and comfort of our passengers and crew. You have created a public disturbance and have harassed another passenger based on what I can only describe as blatant prejudice. Under the authority granted to me as the pilot in command of this aircraft, I am denying you boarding." The words hit with the force of a physical blow. "You can't do that." Caroline shrieked, her composure finally cracking completely. "We have tickets. We have rights. You have the right to be rebooked on a later flight, perhaps tomorrow, after you have had some time to reflect on your conduct." Captain Sterling retorted, his voice unyielding. "But you will not be setting foot on my aircraft today. Airport security will be here momentarily to escort you from the gate area. You can take up your complaints with our corporate office." He then leaned in slightly, his voice dropping so only they could hear. "And I assure you my report on this incident will be extraordinarily detailed." Richard Covington finally spoke, his voice a desperate plea. "Captain, please, it was a misunderstanding." "There was no misunderstanding," Captain Sterling said, cutting him off. "Dr. Drake's credentials are not what is in question here. Your character is. Now please, step aside." Defeated, the Covingtons stumbled back from the jet bridge entrance as 2 uniformed airport security officers, alerted by another gate agent, arrived with quiet efficiency. The public humiliation was now absolute. They, not Serafina, were the ones being escorted away under a cloud of shame. Serafina had watched this entire exchange from the entrance of the jet bridge. She felt no joy, no sense of victory. Just a profound weariness and a small, hard knot of satisfaction that a line had been drawn, that a consequence had been delivered. She turned and began her walk down the long corridor to the plane. The flight attendants at the aircraft door, who had been briefed by the head purser, greeted her with expressions of deep respect. "Welcome aboard," Dr. Drake said, a flight attendant named Maria Rodriguez, her eyes conveying a genuine apology. "We are so honored to have you with us. Please let me show you to your seat." As Serafina settled into the plush leather of seat 1A, a spacious suite at the very front of the cabin, she finally allowed herself to exhale. She looked out the small oval window at the bustling tarmac of Heathrow. The chaos of the gate felt a world away. She had been tested, and she had not broken. She had faced down the ugly face of prejudice and had been vindicated in the most spectacular way imaginable. But the story was not over. The seeds of karma sown in the fertile ground of Carolyn Covington's arrogance were just beginning to sprout, and their harvest would be far more devastating than a missed flight. The Airbus A350-1000 ascended with a powerful, graceful climb, leaving the grey skies of London behind. and bursting through the clouds into the brilliant, unending blue of the stratosphere. For most passengers, it was a routine transition. For Dr. Serafina Drake, it was a moment of profound significance. The two massive engines outside her window, the GE9X power plants, were her life's work. She knew their every secret, the precise metallurgy of the fan blades, the complex fluid dynamics of the combustion chamber, the terabytes of data that governed their flawless performance. They were in a way her children, and today they were carrying her away from a moment of intense ugliness toward one of professional triumph. The first-class cabin was an oasis of tranquility. The flight attendants, particularly Maria Rodriguez, treated Serafina with a reverence that went beyond standard premium service. Her champagne glass was never empty, and she was addressed with a respect that bordered on awe. Word of the incident at the gate had spread like wildfire among the crew, and they were all united in their silent support for her. About an hour into the flight, after the meal service was complete, Captain Sterling emerged from the cockpit and made his way directly to Serafina's seat. "Dr. Drake," he said, crouching slightly to speak with her at eye level. "I hope you're feeling more comfortable now. I wanted to check in personally and apologize once more." "Captain, you have nothing to apologize for," Serafina replied, offering him a small, genuine smile. "You handled the situation with remarkable integrity. In fact, you went above and beyond. Thank you. It's my duty to ensure the safety and well-being of everyone on board. That includes protecting passengers from harassment," he said. "What those people did was inexcusable." He paused, his expression turning to one of professional curiosity. "On a completely different note, I have to say, it's an absolute honor to have you on my flight. The 9X is a marvel of engineering. The fuel efficiency on our climb-out was even better than the specs predicted." A genuine spark of enthusiasm lit up Serafina's eyes. This was her language, the world where she was most comfortable. "We've been working on a new software patch for the FADEC Full Authority Digital Engine Control," she explained. "It optimizes the fuel injection timing at high-thrust, low-altitude scenarios. You're probably one of the first pilots to see the real-world results." For the next 10 minutes, they weren't a pilot and a passenger. They were two experts at the top of their respective fields, geeking out about thrust ratings and turbine blade tolerances. The conversation was a soothing balm on the raw wound of the earlier confrontation. It reminded Serafina of who she was, not a victim, but a creator, a scientist, a leader. As the captain returned to the cockpit, Maria Rodriguez approached Serafina's suite, her expression hesitant. "Dr. Drake," she began in a low voice. "I hope you don't mind me saying, but what happened back there was awful. I'm so sorry you had to go through that." "Thank you, Maria." "I appreciate that," Serafina said warmly. Maria glanced around to ensure no other passengers were listening. "There's something else," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "During the commotion, a passenger in the economy line recorded the whole thing on his phone. The part with the woman accusing you, the gate agent, taking your pass, all of it. He was sitting in my section, and he seemed pretty upset by what he saw." Serafina's interest was piqued. "He did?" "Yes," Maria confirmed. "He mentioned he couldn't believe what he was seeing. He said people like that woman need to be held accountable." She discreetly slipped a small folded napkin onto Serafina's side table. "His name is Ben Carter, and that's his seat number. I thought you should know. That kind of evidence could be important." Serafina looked at the napkin, then back at Maria. She saw in the flight attendant's eyes a shared understanding, an alliance forged in the face of injustice. Thank you, Maria. This is very helpful. After Maria left, Serafina considered her next move. Part of her wanted to forget the entire incident to leave the Covingtons and Kevin Finch to the fate Aerolux would decide for them. But another more pragmatic part of her knew that institutional change rarely happens without a catalyst. A formal report from a pilot was powerful. A formal report from a pilot, accompanied by a viral video of the incident, was a corporate atom bomb. An hour before they began their descent into New York, Serafina made her way down the aisle toward the economy cabin. She found seat 34B and the young man sitting in it. Ben Carter was in his late 20s with a laptop open and headphones on. He looked like a software developer or a tech startup employee. "Excuse me," Serafina said gently. "Are you Ben Carter?" He looked up, startled, and then his eyes widened in recognition. "Oh, wow, yes." "You're Dr. Drake. Are you okay?" "I'm fine, thank you," she said. "A flight attendant mentioned you might have recorded what happened at the gate." Ben's expression turned serious. "I did. I got the whole thing. The way that woman talked to you, the way the agent just folded. It was disgusting. I wasn't sure what to do with the video, but I couldn't just delete it." "I understand," Serafina said. "This may seem like an odd request, but would you be willing to send me that file? I believe it might be useful in ensuring that Aerolux takes this matter as seriously as it needs to." "Useful, I'll airdrop it to you right now," Ben said, already pulling out his phone. "People need to see this." "What's your name on AirDrop Serafina's iPhone?" she replied. A moment later, a notification popped up on her phone. The transfer was complete. "Thank you, Ben," she said, a new resolve hardening in her voice. "You have no idea how much this helps." "No," he replied, looking at her with sincere admiration. "Thank you for the engines and for handling that with more grace than I thought was humanly possible." As Serafina returned to her seat, she opened the video file. The quality was crystal clear. It captured Caroline Covington's sneering voice, Kevin Finch's dismissive actions, and her own forced composure in stark, undeniable detail. She then composed an email. The recipient was Isabelle Renault, the head of North American operations for Aerolux, a woman Serafina had met at an industry dinner a few years prior. The subject line was simple: "Incident on Flight AL-101. Dr. Serafina Drake." The email itself was concise and professional. She detailed the events, praised Captain Sterling and the flight crew for their professionalism, and then she attached the video file. She ended the email with a single powerful sentence: "While I am confident Captain Sterling's report will be thorough, I believe this footage provides a visceral context that is crucial for understanding the systemic training and cultural failures that allowed this incident to occur at an Aerolux gate." She hit send just as the plane's Wi-Fi was being disconnected for landing. The ripple effect had begun. The splash at the gate in London was about to become a tsunami that would crash upon the shores of the Covingtons' carefully curated life. The moment Aerolux Flight 101 touched down at JFK, the gears of a massive corporate machine began to turn. Captain Sterling's formal incident report, filed from the cockpit, was flagged with the highest level of urgency. It landed in the inbox of every relevant executive, including Isabelle Renault. But it was Serafina's email with its damning video attachment that lit the real fire. Isabelle Renault was a sharp, no-nonsense executive who had spent her career battling the old boys club of the aviation industry. She was fiercely protective of Aerolux's brand, but she was also a pragmatist who understood the power of social media and the catastrophic potential of a viral incident involving racism. Watching the video Ben Carter had filmed made her blood run cold. It wasn't just a customer service issue. It was a brand-defining crisis in the making. Her first calls were to the Heathrow station manager and the head of human resources. Kevin Finch, she said, her voice devoid of emotion. His employment with Aerolux is terminated, effective immediately. I don't want him suspended. I don't want him on leave. I want him gone. His actions were a complete abdication of his training, his responsibilities, and basic human decency. His final paycheck will be mailed to him. There was no argument. The evidence was absolute. By the time Serafina was collecting her luggage from the carousel at JFK, Kevin Finch was receiving a call from his manager in London, telling him not to bother coming in for his shift the next day or ever again. His ID card had already been deactivated. Kevin's karma was swift and brutal. He was a man who took the easy way out, and he had just discovered that the easy way often leads directly off a cliff. He had sided with a bully, and in doing so, had sacrificed his career. He would spend the next few months unemployed, the story of his firing becoming a cautionary tale whispered among other airline employees. Isabel Renault's next action was to address the Covingtons. Captain Sterling had already banned them from his flight, but Isabel was thinking bigger. She pulled up their Aerolux loyalty program profiles. They were Diamond Medallion members, flying hundreds of thousands of miles a year, spending a fortune on premium tickets. They were on paper exactly the kind of customers the airline wanted to retain. But not today. Isabel typed a memo to the corporate security and customer relations departments. Richard and Caroline Covington, she dictated to her assistant, are to be placed on the permanent no-fly list for Aerolux and all our partner airlines. Revoke their medallion status and cancel all future bookings. A letter is to be drafted informing them that their behavior at Gate A17 on August 28th created a threat to passenger and crew harmony and is in gross violation of our conditions of carriage. We do not tolerate harassment of any kind. They are no longer welcome on our aircraft. This was more than just a travel inconvenience. It was a status symbol being ripped away. The Covingtons, who prided themselves on their globe-trotting lifestyle, were now grounded, exiled from the very world of privilege they so fiercely guarded. But the most devastating blow was yet to come, and it would be delivered by the court of public opinion. While Aerolux was cleaning its own house, Isabel Renault's PR team was in crisis mode. They knew that a video this explosive wouldn't stay private for long. It was only a matter of time before someone else who had witnessed the event posted their own footage, or before Ben Carter decided to share his. They had to get ahead of the story. A carefully worded internal memo was sent out to all Aerolux staff, detailing the incident in vague terms, but reinforcing the company's zero-tolerance policy on discrimination. A public statement was drafted. But more importantly, Isabel Renault personally called Dr. Serafina Drake at her hotel. Dr. Drake, Isabel Renault here. First, on behalf of our entire global family at Aerolux, I am mortified. I have seen the video. There are no words, Isabel began. I want to personally assure you that the gate agent has been terminated and the Covingtons have been permanently banned from our airline. Thank you, Isabel. I appreciate the swift action, Serafina replied, her voice calm. That's not all, Isabel continued. We understand that this incident is about more than just one employee or two horrible passengers. It's a systemic failure. We are immediately launching a root and branch review of our diversity, equity, and inclusion training for all customer-facing staff. And I was hoping, we were wondering if you would consider acting as a paid consultant on that project to help us build a program that ensures this never ever happens again. Serafina was taken aback. This was more than she had expected. It was an opportunity to turn a moment of personal humiliation into a catalyst for real structural change. "I will consider it, Isabel," she said. "Send me the proposal." While Serafina was considering how to build a better world, the world of the Covingtons was rapidly catching fire. Ben Carter, the young man who filmed the video, had posted it to his social media. He hadn't done it for fame. He did it out of a sense of outrage. He wrote a simple caption: "This happened today at Heathrow. A brilliant woman was harassed and humiliated for no reason other than the color of her skin. The woman doing the accusing is Caroline Covington. The world needs to see this." He tagged Aerolux and a few major news outlets. The video exploded. Within hours, it had 1 million views. By the next morning, it was at 10 million. The names Caroline Covington and Dr. Serafina Drake were trending. News outlets picked up the story, contrasting the video of Caroline's ugly accusations with screenshots of Dr. Drake's incredible professional biography. She was a genius, a trailblazer in a male-dominated field. Caroline Covington, in contrast, was quickly becoming the new face of entitled bigotry, a gate Karen. The digital wildfire raged, and soon it reached the manicured lawns of the Covingtons' professional life. Richard Covington was a founding partner at Covington & Croft, a prestigious management consulting firm in New York City. His name was on the door. He had built his reputation on being a shrewd, discerning judge of character and a master of corporate strategy. The viral video of him, standing idly by, smirking, while his wife racially profiled and harassed one of the world's leading engineers, was not just embarrassing, it was professionally catastrophic. The phones at Covington & Croft began ringing off the hook on Friday morning. They weren't from potential clients, they were from existing ones. Major corporations, terrified of being associated with the Covington name, were calling to suspend their multi-million-dollar contracts. "Our company's values do not align with the behavior displayed in that video," was the common, chilling refrain from CEOs and board members. The firm's other partners convened an emergency meeting. Richard wasn't invited. For hours, they debated how to handle the PR nightmare that was immolating their firm's reputation. Their conclusion was brutal and swift. By midday, Richard Covington received a call from his own partner, Michael Croft. Richard Michael said, his voice cold and formal, "The board has voted. We're invoking the morality clause in your partnership agreement. We're asking for your immediate resignation." "Michael, you can't be serious," Richard sputtered. "This is my firm. It was a misunderstanding. My wife was—" "Your wife was a bigot in public, Richard, and you were her silent, smiling accomplice." Michael cut in his voice, sharp. "The damage is done. The firm is hemorrhaging clients. Our brand is toxic because of you. You can either resign gracefully, or we will vote to expel you and issue a public statement denouncing you. Your choice." The choice was an illusion. Richard's career, a career he had spent a lifetime building, was over. He was being forced out of his own company. The name on the door would soon be changed to Croft and Associates. Caroline Covington's karma was just as devastating, but it played out in the social sphere she valued so highly. She was the chair of the board for several high-profile arts and charity organizations in New York. Her position was built on a reputation of grace, philanthropy, and social influence. The video annihilated that reputation overnight. By Friday afternoon, she had received formal emails from every single charity board. The language was polite but firm. In light of recent events, it would be best for the organization if you stepped down to avoid any further distraction from our mission. She was a pariah. Her friends stopped returning her calls. The invitations to galas and fundraisers which had once filled her calendar abruptly ceased. She had built her identity on a pedestal of social superiority, and in one fell swoop, she had been knocked off it, exposed to the world as ugly and cruel. The Covingtons found themselves trapped in their lavish Upper East Side apartment, the curtains drawn as news vans parked on the street outside. They had become prisoners in their own gilded cage, the architects of their own destruction. Their wealth couldn't protect them. Their status was gone. All they had left was the bitter taste of public shame. Meanwhile, in a conference hall downtown, Dr. Serafina Drake walked onto a brightly lit stage to a thunderous standing ovation. The audience was filled with the best and brightest minds in aerospace engineering. They weren't just clapping for the paper she was about to present, they were clapping for her. Her story had become a source of inspiration, a symbol of grace under pressure. She approached the podium, looked out at the sea of faces, and smiled. She didn't mention the Covingtons. She didn't talk about the gate agent or the viral video. She didn't have to. She began her keynote address, her voice clear and confident, resonating through the auditorium. The principles of orbital mechanics teach us that for every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction, she began. It is a fundamental law of the universe, governing the motion of planets and the trajectory of spacecraft. But I believe this law extends beyond the realm of physics. It applies to our lives, to our actions, to the energy we put out into the world. Every act of kindness, every moment of grace, every decision to stand up for what is right creates a positive trajectory. And every act of prejudice, every abuse of privilege, every moment of cruelty will eventually, inevitably create its own opposite reaction, pulling you back down to earth with the inescapable gravity of your own character. She then clicked to the first slide of her presentation, a stunning 3D model of the GE9X engine. Now she said, her smile widening, "Let's talk about thrust." The audience was captivated. They saw before them not a victim to be pitied, but a leader to be admired, a woman who had faced down ugliness and had responded not with anger, but with an even greater commitment to the brilliance and elegance that defined her life's work. 6 months later, the world had largely moved on, as it always does. The Covingtons had sold their apartment and moved to a smaller, more private community in Florida, seeking anonymity. Richard was forced into an early, ignominious retirement. Caroline was no longer a name on any charity letterhead. They existed in a quiet, self-imposed exile, their names forever linked to a viral video that defined them in the worst possible way. Their karma wasn't a single event. It was a permanent state of being, a life sentence of social irrelevance. Kevin Finch, the former gate agent, eventually found a job working in a warehouse far from the public-facing roles he was now unqualified for. He was a ghost in the vast machinery of logistics, a man who learned too late that neutrality in the face of injustice is a choice for the oppressor. But the positive reactions, as Dr. Drake had predicted in her speech, were just as powerful and far more enduring. Aerolux, with Serafina's direct and paid consultation, rolled out the Drake Initiative, a comprehensive new training program for all 80,000 of its employees. It used the anonymized Gate A17 incident as a core case study in de-escalation, unconscious bias, and cultural competency. It was hailed as the new gold standard in the airline industry. Isabel Renault and Serafina became professional allies, pushing for greater change and accountability across the aviation world. Ben Carter, the young man who shot the video, was publicly praised by Aerolux for his integrity. He received a letter of thanks from Serafina and a gift from the airline, a lifetime of top-tier elite status, a reward for choosing to be an upstander. not a bystander. And Dr. Serafina Drake, her life was changed, but not in the way the Covingtons had intended. Her keynote speech had been hailed as one of the best in the history of the conference. The story of the incident, combined with her immense talent, had turned her from a respected engineer into a public figure. She was featured in magazines, interviewed on television, not just for her work with engines, but for her quiet strength and unwavering dignity. She used her new platform not to dwell on the past, but to build a better future. She launched a non-profit foundation dedicated to providing scholarships and mentorship for young women and students of color pursuing careers in STEM. She wanted to ensure that the next generation of brilliant minds would never be made to feel that they didn't belong in the rooms where decisions were made, or in the front of a plane. On a cool spring evening, Serafina found herself once again at an airport, this time heading to a ceremony in Stockholm, where she was receiving a prestigious international award for her contributions to aeronautical science. As she walked through the first-class lounge, a young black girl, no older than 10, timidly approached her, holding a picture from a magazine. "Are you Dr. Drake?" the girl asked, her eyes wide with wonder. "I am Serafina," said smiling warmly. "My mom said you build the engines that make planes fly." The girl whispered. "She said you're a hero." Serafina crouched down to the girl's level. "Well, I don't know about being a hero," she said gently. "But I do love to build things that help people reach for the sky. And you know what? You can do that too." The girl's face lit up with a brilliant smile. In that moment, Serafina knew the true meaning of karma. It wasn't just about punishment for the cruel. It was about the beautiful, unexpected, and powerful reactions that come from facing down darkness with light. The laughter and scorn of two ignorant people at a gate had, through a chain of unforeseen events, led to this, a moment of inspiration that could launch a new dream into the stratosphere. And that was a trajectory more perfect than any she could have ever designed. Dr. Serafina Drake's story is a powerful, real-world reminder that our true value is never determined by the prejudice or ignorance of others. It's defined by our character, our actions, and the grace with which we navigate the challenges thrown our way. The Covingtons and Kevin Finch chose to act on ugly assumptions and faced the inevitable gravity of their choices. But it was Captain Sterling, Maria Rodriguez, and Ben Carter who chose to act with integrity, proving that good people standing up can change the entire narrative. They didn't just witness an injustice, they corrected it. This story shows that karma isn't some mystical force. It's the logical social consequence of our actions in a world that is more connected than ever. If this story of justice and vindication resonated with you, please give this video a like and share it with someone who needs to hear it. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more true stories that matter. What did you think of the captain's response? Let us know in the comments below.